Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian talk show on POT TV. Sometimes we discuss Russia and China, but trying not to go into it that much. Um, and we have today a distinguished guest, actually two of those. First of course, our regular contributor, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here.
And we have founder of the network, Nick Poliveda. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey, Sasha, how you doing?
Good, very good. So we just, in our previous show, we discussed a lot the international politics issue, of course, touching Ukrainian-Russian war and many other events. And one of the participants in the show, he asked a very interesting question. So embargo against Russia and many other countries doesn't really work. So what U.S. and the Western countries, NATO countries, European Union countries, what else are they prepared to do? If this doesn't work, then what else? What other instruments do they have, and how they can proceed in foreseeable future in this very uncertain world? My reply was very simple: to give Ukrainians all the weapons they need and finish this war by taking over the Ukrainian territory as of borders of 1991. Just that much. We're not talking about taking over Moscow, Voronezh, or Novosibirsk. No, just restore the international Ukrainian borders. And then you'll see a very interesting thing that, in my opinion, the US, NATO, European countries will be much more respected in the world. And a lot of issues that now seems to be almost unresolvable, all of a sudden they will be resolved and very quickly. Jonathan, what's your opinion?
Well, I agree with you on the first part of that. The obvious necessary prerequisite is a Ukrainian victory in the Russian-Ukrainian war, which includes the recovery of Crimea, which the Ukrainians are very well on their way to do by with the progress they're making in their counteroffensive, despite the criticisms of certain Western experts who don't think it's going fast enough. Well, they're not Ukraine. They're not in the position of Ukraine and don't have to deal with their particular circumstances. But that is the first necessary prerequisite: drive Russian forces out of Ukrainian territory, preferably all of it before any kind of ceasefire or armistice can be achieved. But we're not talking about a peace treaty, because the Russians will never reconcile themselves to a permanent loss of Ukraine. They may reluctantly, if compelled to by military defeat, accept an armistice, but only they will simply begin planning as the Germans did after World War I. They began planning in the backs of their minds, okay, what about round two in the future? So there is that. And also, but as I've advocated on previous editions of this program, the surer way to guarantee that Russia will never threaten the West again in the foreseeable future is for the United States and NATO to join together to create a global ballistic missile defense system, which is capable of neutralizing the one thing which makes Russia, in its own view, a great power: its nuclear arsenal. And the way you do that is you do something which most people do not think of. You do that by upgrading the current U.S. Space Force, which currently consists of 80 satellites. And in the Russian and Chinese view, that's not a space force. That's just a set of 80 targets waiting to be disrupted. What you do is you upgrade the U.S. Space Force with a manned space fleet that is capable of carrying laser weapons, which are in turn capable of conducting boost phase intercept of all nuclear missiles that are launched from any opposing power. And where do you get the space fleet? You buy it from SpaceX. Because if you take a look at the specifications of the spacecraft that Elon Musk has produced, they are mutually supporting. And if you buy a goodly quantity of these types of spacecraft, you have an excellent foundation for creating a manned space force, which can carry out both planetary defense missions capable of protecting the entire planet from various hazards, as well as maintaining international strategic stability by neutralizing the nuclear arsenals of opposing rogue states or others who would seek to use their nuclear weapons as means of political leverage, such as Russia has attempted to do. So, in the short term, Sasha, yes, what you're saying, Ukrainian operational military victory on the battlefield is the first necessary prerequisite. In order to make sure that that lasts and is a long-lasting I would say for a century or more, U.S. and NATO need to take steps to create that global ballistic missile defense system, which will serve to neutralize the nuclear arsenals of aggressive rogue states.
John, a very quick question. The technology is already available. Everything what you are describing, the technology is already there. So how much time would take to implement all this, what you described?
Okay, now that's always the $64 million or $64 billion question, depending on what scale you're talking about. But the first thing, what the Pentagon could do in the short term is it could, in effect, with the right type of contract vehicle, they could say to Elon, we would like to buy 12 of your Falcon 9s, 12 of your Falcon Heavies, and 12 of your Starships. And we will add weapons, equipment, crew, and the appropriate doctrine and strategy and tactics to create the Space Force, which will be capable of carrying out multiple missions.
And interconnectivity. They all have to be interconnected, of course.
Correct. You want the interconnectivity so that the Space Force can not only support the other military services, but can also support international alliances such as NATO, and thus create that global ballistic, which I call in my book the Worldwide Strategic Defense Matrix, or WISDOM, to be cute with an acronym, but an appropriately named system. This would be able to enforce strategic stability because Russia and China, with their counterspace weapons, those counterspace weapons are designed to attack satellites, not starships. If you attack a starship in low Earth orbit, that is a clear act of war. Unlike a satellite, which is more ambiguous. Satellites don't have mothers. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those situations. The steps are there. The technology is there. The one great secret, which is that all of this is possible given the political will and strategic thinking required to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. Nick, what's your observation on our previous discussions about what U.S. and West could do, especially now when there is Africa is dying from the lack of grains. Ukraine has that grain available to ship any moment, and Russia started the blockade of Ukrainian ports.
Yeah.
How you deal with that?
You deal with it real simply, Sasha, which had been done a long time ago. Take 100 F-16s, 100 of them, and ship them to Ukraine and train them, if they're not trained already, how to fly the F-16s. I'd also deliver about 25 F-35s just to see how they perform operationally in battle. In other words, 125 aircraft that are modern, and that will take down, let the Ukrainians take down all those ships using air superiority. Without air superiority, you're never going to win this war. So we do need to get off our butts and start shipping off those F-16s to Ukraine and give them 100 of them. I don't know why we're not doing that already. Give them the air superiority. Remember how we busted the Soviet Union last time, Sasha? Is we spent more money than the Soviet Union did. And they basically gave up. They could not keep up with the West and how fast and how much. We busted Germany, same way. How much our military industrial complex can produce when desired to produce. So what we need to do is get off our butts and start producing the military weapons to give Ukraine superiority. Then we, of course, simultaneously do what Dr. John Lockwood says, develop a Star Wars system. I think Americans don't realize, and the only way they can find this out is to go to certain blogs, which I recommend, that these people hate you, okay? They don't like you, they hate you. And a lot of them are thugs, like you said, Sasha. They're you might as well turn around and give the United States to the drug cartels, let them run it, you know, and then you'll see what and that's how they run their countries. So we don't run our country that way. We're not going to let them run the world that way, and we need to put our foot down and start sending these military aircraft to the Ukraine immediately.
You know, interestingly enough, what Russia contributes to the world? Corruption, misery. If you take any book of Dostoevsky or Tolstoy, there is a misery on every page. You turn a page, more misery. You turn even more. So, prostitution. Okay, that's very healthy. Addition to the world. Yeah.
Look, even what Stalin did in World War II. He basically kissed Hitler, and they divided Poland. And the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. You know, I mean, you're talking about a country that is basically a rogue nation, and you know you got to treat them like a rogue nation, which means you don't bend, you fight. You got to watch the movie Patton and deliver the way Patton delivers, which is what I think is the way to deliver. Yeah,
I know what you know what I'm thinking, Nick.
Right, America loves the war.
Inside joke.
You know, speaking about
stop this messing around with Russia. Look, 100 F-16s will break their back and frankly will not break our bank. We spend 800 billion on our military, almost $1 trillion. They spend 70 billion. They don't have the money. They don't have the people. They don't have the resources to defend themselves from Ukraine, a well-supplied Ukraine by the United States. So why are we messing around with this stuff? I don't get it.
Well, I think the only right answer to that could be that Biden is extra cautious. He is scared of escalation, but it's not really escalation. It's let's call it the spade. It's a nuclear war, all-out thermonuclear war with Russia. He is scared of it as death. He doesn't understand that Putin and his elite, they won't enjoy life. And that doesn't include thermonuclear exchange at all.
Right. But he's not the only one. Look at this Vivek Ramaswamy guy. You know, talk about a guy who doesn't know anything. And, you know, he actually led in the polls in terms of the debate. But he goes, oh, well, we should just withdraw. Him and Neville Chamberlain would get along fine. I hope they have a cup of tea together while Hitler takes over the world. I mean, the guy's an idiot. And Republicans vote for him. So Vivek Ramaswamy should not be president of anything, okay, in the United States. I mean, if anything, maybe he should run a hotel chain somewhere. I don't know. But definitely not being in American politics.
I would support him running hotel chain as long as it doesn't have access to cash.
As long as you should go run a hotel chain in Russia for about a year, and then Ramaswamy can tell us how he's going to deal with Ukrainians. Now, when I was in the hotel chain in Russia, the Petropalace, which was really nice in Leningrad, you know, the people were nice, everything was cool until you get pickpocketed, and then you find out the police and the pickpockets work together, you know, and that's Russia. So you just kind of have to get. Their system is not
my one experience in Moscow with hotel chains was the Hotel Aerostar, which was interestingly enough a Canadian Russian venture, and that worked in the early 90s. I don't know if it's still working now. I doubt it.
But you know the end of this hotel cooperation. What was the end of it? The end of it was that there was arbitration court in Sweden. And the Aeroflot, which was partner of the Canadian company, they had to pay Canadians $11 million. And that's it. That would be the end of all this joint venture and all that stuff. Of course, Aeroflot never paid, and they were laughing. Oh, what a joke! The arbitration in Sweden. Oh, arbitration in Sweden. Oh, we must pay $11,000 million. Oh, what tragedy! Of course, they never paid. They ignored it until one day there was a plane, Russian plane, Il-62, ready to fly. It was 2000, the early 2000s. They were supposed to fly from Montreal to Moscow. It was already boarded the plane, ready to fly. The Canadian Mountain Police came over to the plane, ordered everybody to leave the plane, and arrested the plane. They said that it's no longer under jurisdiction of Russia. It's now under jurisdiction of Canada.
Yeah.
And they paid next day $11 million. Next day. That's how Russians understand. That's how they behave. That's how they act. If you are unfortunate enough, for example, let's see, you're suing a Russian person or company or whatever, they will never settle. They will pay their lawyers hundreds of thousands of dollars. They will go on for 2, 3, 4 years. And at the very end, they will lose the lawsuit, and they will have to pay that, and they will have enormous legal fees and so on. But they will fight until the very, very last moment. That's how they are. That's why the Ukraine is unfortunate to have a neighbor such as Russia, and therefore they have to deal with that almost indefinitely, unless Russia will collapse as a result of loss of Crimea, and maybe it will be dissolved into several Russian, much smaller countries. It's quite possible. Some of them national countries like Tatarstan, whatever. We'll see.
If Russia was so great, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia would all want to be part of the Russian Empire. But guess what? They don't. They want to be part of Europe. I wonder why. It's because maybe it isn't so great. Maybe it is a corrupt regime. Maybe the thing is its organization is by conmen, artisans, and thieves. And if you do something against Putin, your airplane gets shot down. Or, excuse me, a bomb so happily gets misplaced in your airplane and gets shot down. So you're dealing with, this is what you're dealing with. So why is the West pussyfooting around? Batman, send them 100 F-16s. Send them the F-35. Send them our latest and greatest technology. Escalate this a little bit, baby. See if the Russians are willing to put up. I don't think they will. I agree with Dr. John that these people will, or you, Sasha, that they'll fold, okay? Because they like their wealthy thieving lifestyles, and they're not going to jeopardize it when the West puts up some decent battle cards.
Well, it's like Winston Churchill once said about the Russians. He says, "There is nothing that the Russians respect more than strength, and there is nothing for which they have more contempt than weakness, particularly military weakness."
And our leaders in Washington, do they project strength or weakness, Dr. John? Oh, you don't have to answer that question. I'll help you out because you're in Washington, D.C. They project weakness. You know, Biden is weak. Vivek Ramaswamy is weaker. And when you have all these weakies running Washington, then of course, they're going to invade Ukraine. They're going to do what they want to until you step to the plate. So, and the Congress is worthless. What the heck is that? There's no congressman that is stepping to the plate. So when you have a worthless government in Washington, D.C., of course, you're going to let these people dance around as if they own the world, and they don't. And that's what you have right now in Washington, D.C. Sorry, John, that you happen to live there.
We don't know my exact location, okay?
No,
but that's okay.
Putin doesn't either.
We're being approximate for the sake of the show.
Yeah, Putin doesn't know your exact location
That's
either.
right.
Otherwise, some bomb will make it.
I want to keep it that way, okay? So don't drop any hints.
Yeah, otherwise they'll drop a bomb on you. I mean, the thing is, and that's the nature of their beast. So you just got to realize that is who you're dealing with. And the media doesn't explain that to the American public. Okay. And and obviously Vivek Ramaswamy never got the memo because I don't think he stepped outside the United States his entire life, except maybe make a trip to India, which sucks up to Russia. So what? The guy doesn't have a clue. So get rid of him, Republicans, as soon as you can. Vivek Ramaswamy, stick him on the next boat to the Hotel California, wherever he came from. Not that I'm a beat him up, but I am. He's not on our
Well,
show.
there, Nick. Now that you've told us how you really feel,
No, he's weak. Why would you want a weakie as your leader? No one does, you know. So Republicans, get anybody else but this guy.
A lot of things will unravel about Vivek, and very, very soon. First of all, he is not a scientist as he perceived, a biologist or anything. He has completed undergraduate studies, and then he didn't continue his master degree in biology. No, he went into School of Law. Why he needed the law? So he would know how to fleece investors without being responsible for that. For that, he organized a company, which from nothing, when he organized the company, there were 8 people, including his brother and his mother, and that was a company that he took public. And its valuation in a very short period of time, 3 months or so, reached $3 billion. Now, what was the asset of that company? It was a patent held by GlaxoSmithKline, which had 4 clinical trials. All of them failed. He bought that patent for a song, put it into the company, and started to promote it. That this is a great, that we are going to very soon to have clinical trials, going to be successful beyond any reasonable expectations, on and on, $3 billion valuation. Guess what? There was a clinical trial, but unsuccessful. It failed.
Are you talking about Elizabeth Holmes, the ladies in jail? Is that who you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about Vivek and his...
the guy who didn't go to jail because he's not a lady. If he was a lady like Elizabeth Holmes or Martha Stewart, that sucker would be in jail for what he did.
Absolutely.
Classic pump and dump.
But what he did, you see, this company, the major shareholder, was his private company. So the private company didn't suffer because he didn't put into that outfit where get a valuation of $3 billion. He didn't put even a penny of his own money.
Right.
No. So that bombed. All investors, it went down in one day 75%, stayed a little bit longer for another month or two, and went down to zero and closed the show. Hundreds of thousands of investors lost all their money with this horrible swindle. And I think that it will unravel pretty soon because it's been already published, this material, in New York Times.
Wow.
So if New York Times already went after that, so we can expect it's going to happen.
So what you're telling me, Sasha, if you fail in business and your companies go bankrupt and you steal a lot of money from the companies on the way down the tube, your next step is to get into politics. So are you talking about Donald Trump, or who are you talking about?
I'll tell you, there is no much difference between both of them. Vivek is probably, because he's much younger, maybe he is much more creative than old Donald. Maybe that's true. But he doesn't have Donald's energy and Donald's...
it's really sad. The solid Republicans, like Mike Pence, he gets no love. You know, the guy is solid. So he's basically straight, and it's really sad that the American public vote for crazies who are not leaders but not solid people who are straight. So maybe someday that'll all change.
Mike Pence could do well in countries like Germany, for example, maybe even UK, not in France, and definitely not in US.
Obviously not in US. I thought he did the best job in the debate, and he got no love at all.
I think, yes.
And they all jumped on Vivek. I'm going, Vivek was horrible. So it just shows how
obnoxious. He was interrupting everybody on the debates. He was talking over everybody. He was just obnoxious, trying to win attention because obviously he was the most unknown entity of them all. So he was trying to be controversial. He was trying to talk over each other, and Come on, that's nothing. I would like to share with you my experience of actually last night. I was out of town and came back and you see, just check my email. And there was email from my old friend who happened to be a fan of John Mersheimer, who is well known for his policy of the power system. What is it's a part of real politics, and his long ago his view on politics was that well, take Russia and Ukraine. Russia is a leader; it's a world power. It's a great country. Ukraine nothing at its best. So therefore, Russia has advantage in manpower, 4-1, in artillery, which is the most important thing in today's war, 5-1, and most likely 10-1. So there is no contest. Ukraine will be absolutely destroyed and by Russia, and Russia will annex most of its territories, and that's his view. But that his view, I heard about that even before the beginning of war or after the beginning of war. But now, and I read his, or I heard his interview very recent, about a week ago, and oh my God, he's still in the same positions today. So after listening to this interview, I wrote to my friend this email. Thank you for your email. I've been following John Marsheimer for some time. With regards to Ukraine, he is using the Russian playbook. He treats Russia as a great power. However, it does not have any attributes of the great power: economy, armed forces, culture, education, etc. Regarding nuclear weapons, Putin was warned not to use them by all countries, including US, UK, China, India, etc. And most likely, they are useless because of lack of maintenance, corruption, and failure to follow commands. Russia is bringing to the West, to the world, nothing but corruption, misery, killings, prostitution, and for all the last 80 years, the threat of thermonuclear war. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, Bush Sr. must have taken out all Russian nuclear arsenal. It was possible to do for a song. However, he failed to do so. Now Ukraine is ready to eradicate the Russian threat once and for all without any loss of NATO or US lives. Professor is making some noises about Northeast and Southeast Asia. Please, the future of the war, of the whole civilized world, is now decided in Ukraine. Now that Ukraine has started to produce its own mid-range missiles, sophisticated drones, and many other weapons, they are going to take over Crimea anytime soon. That spells out the end of Putin's regime. This is a goal of the all civilized world, including Northeast and Southeast Asia. That's what I sent to him.
Uh, that would be pretty much telling him off.
Yeah, in a
You're
way.
not going to be on his Christmas list.
Yes, so he's not going to be on mine either.
No.
Yeah. So while we are discussing geopolitical issues, we forgot about one important thing. Ukraine is brilliantly attacking on the, especially southern Zaporizhia front.
Yes, they are, and they are continuing to using their unique approach of maintaining pressure on more than one front in order to prevent Russia from laterally reinforcing against only one threat. Against, so say for example, their main threat, they are keeping the pressure on other portions of the theater in order to prevent Russia from laterally reinforcing. So this in turn creates it's a splitting strategy, which is designed to eventually one of those axes of advance is going to collapse. And it looks like the one that is most likely to collapse is the one on which they're currently driving towards the Sea of Azov. And once they attain that and get within range to where they can cut the supply and reinforcement link between Crimea and Russia, then we will be close to an end game, because then the Ukrainians will be free to commit their remaining reserves into an offensive into occupied Crimea, where the Russians who are cut off will not be able to resist effectively, and they will be able to take over the whole of Crimea and inflict a major operational defeat on the Russian army, which in turn will have major political repercussions, in which the Western allies and the world can put pressure on Russia to simply call it a day, go for an armistice, withdraw from Ukraine, and let's have ourselves, if not a genuine peace, at least the absence of armed conflict, to where then, under a very cautious armistice, the Western allies will be able to reconstruct, rebuild, and reinforce Ukraine, to where at a certain propitious moment in the future, the Ukrainians will be gladly and happily admitted into NATO as a full-fledged member. Maybe it may take some patience and combined with persistence and pressure, but this is possible. It just requires an above-average degree of political will and persistence.
Actually, Jonathan, Ukrainians are very close, provided that they will sooner or later destroy the Crimea Bridge, which they don't necessarily have to fully destroy it. They just make it.
They just be able to interdict it.
Yes, exactly. So essentially, they're very close, maybe in a matter of few weeks, to seal the Crimea. So the Crimea will be completely isolated. So whatever the Russian army is still there in Crimea, but they will be completely isolated. So they will stay there for, say, months, maybe 2 months, and they will have to surrender because they will not be able to leave. They will not be able to rearm themselves, and there will be no food supplies, gasoline supplies, nothing. So that these, they even don't have to invade Crimea, Ukrainian forces. They have to isolate it and encircle.
Well, if the isolating it is almost sufficient in and of itself. Yeah. But the actual taking of the territory will still be necessary in order to complete. Complete the job and to complete the defeat, to prevent the Russians occupying there from looting or plundering or otherwise oppressing the Ukrainian people in the Crimea. So the Ukrainian forces will have to come in at some point, and that will be the job of the uncommitted Ukrainian reserves.
Yes, absolutely. Jonathan, totally agree with you on all points what we've discussed today. I would like to thank you so much for your contribution to today's program, and hope to have much better news on Friday, where I will see you same place, same time.
Well, it's all going in the right direction.
Excellent. Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine. Bye-bye.